This crowd rises to its feet. Okoro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Carter, what happened, man? We leave for the holidays and the Cavs double the amount of home losses they have, with losses to both the Toronto Raptors and Brooklyn Nets. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling good, Justin. Last night, instead of watching a bunch of millionaire athletes play sports, I watched a bunch of millionaires actors and watched Knives Out with my mom. So that was super fun. I
watched it after the game as well. I enjoyed it.
I had a great time.
Not as much as the first, though.
But I think that kind of helps that it wasn't a real sequel. No repeat characters, so I didn't feel like I had to tether my my experience at all to the first one. Either way, that's not what we're here to talk about, though. I did enjoy the movie. Cavs lost to the Nets, in a game that I think a lot of us were really hoping, especially after the Bucks win and then kind of a flat Toronto loss. You're like, okay, well, if they beat the Nets, who I think, even despite that barrage last night, I still think we had match up pretty well with them.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe we're cooking with gas, but instead they spend most of the game down double digits. KD just cooks them. Kyrie just cooks them. TJ Warren just cooks them. And a Darius Garland 40 burger keeps them in the game. But it wasn't enough. And, now they've lost 2 in a row. And, that it wasn't as impressive as a homestand as you might have hoped, I think, all told.
Yeah, obviously the homestand got off to a very good start for the Cavs. The Toronto game was disappointing. I think that was a sentiment that was shared across the team. I saw that JB Bickerstaff noted that it was an example of the Cavs not responding to success well. Basically, hey, we've had a good homestand so far. We're coming off a big win against Milwaukee, and we just didn't come out with the effort that was needed against Toronto, right? And Jared Allen shared that sentiment as well, just saying that they didn't really get up for that game. Maybe a good reminder that even though the Toronto games and matchups are so near and dear to my heart, that's not necessarily the case for the team. But
Dude, I'll tell you what I think it was, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that Toronto game was, we just got our chest caved in every possession trying to guard Giannis. And I don't think they wanted to do it 2 games in a row.
That's fair. I mean, you get up for the playoff teams. You got to do the same for these non-playoff teams like Toronto. So that's, again, a lesson that the Cavs need to learn. But you know what? I actually thought the Cavs acquitted themselves well against Brooklyn. I thought overall it was a pretty good effort. They made multiple runs and pushes within that game. Brooklyn's close to the first half, I think, was the most devastating of all. But the Cavs kept kind of responding.
To me, that's for sure.
That was not a fun stretch of basketball. It's funny now that the Cavs are back at a level where we have to focus on every single contender. We have to kind of evaluate where we stack up with all these teams, and Brooklyn certainly matches that description. It's a lot less fun to once again be going up against Kevin Durant, hitting ridiculous contested shots, best tough shot maker, in my opinion, in league history. And then Kyrie Irving, who we used to be on the other side of that, and it was a whole lot more fun when he did it. But the way that the Cavs kind of weathered the storm and got back into it, I think for a first matchup against Brooklyn, and certainly at a time when Brooklyn is the hottest team in the league right now, I honestly came away from that game feeling pretty good about the Cavs' overall effort.
Yes and no. For me, they gave up a 132 offensive rating in the first half.
Not great.
A lot of those, and I think you probably have the stat ready about how many contested threes that Brooklyn hit in that game. But I do think there was a little bit of, I don't think the Cavs were doing a particularly good job of getting these guys off their spots. I know it's a very hyper anecdotal example, but there's a play where the Cavs are just a little loose, and they're able to find Kevin Durant right at the free throw, a step or two inside the free throw line, with Mobley a step or two off of him, and he just catches it and immediately rises and hits, what amounts to a layup for him. Durant's a 59% shooter from mid range this year. Like the plays where Durant is just catching and elevating inside the 3-point arc just can't happen. You at least got to make him fade away a little bit, or at least
same goes for Kyrie pull-ups in transition, right? Like that's a rhythm jumper. And I think, sorry to cut you off, but I think you're on the money when it comes to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. The only way to properly defend them is before the shot goes up, right? Like you have to really impact them. You have to get them out of their rhythm, because once they elevate, it doesn't matter if you've got a hand in their face. If they're comfortable, they have a good chance of making the shot. They're two of the best tough shot makers in league history. So I think overall you're on the money there with them.
Yeah, and so and I think on the offensive side of the ball, I was a little disappointed with the way that the Cavs the last two games have responded to the physicality of the other teams. Especially a game against Brooklyn, where Brooklyn is not full of like hefty dudes, like all their players are bean poles, kind of like the Cavs.
Yeah.
And like I think we saw
long but lean.
And I know there's going to be a lot of discussion about the shooting, and we need to have it, but also, if we're gonna run Mobley and Jarrett front court, and while Mobley's jumper is not where it needs to be, long term, they've got to finish around the rim, and they've got to impose their physical will on smaller, weaker teams. And I think the last two games really showed like a lack of muscle from those guys. Mm-hmm. They're just, and I know that's not really their frame. They're not, they're not bruiser types, but like, when you have a size and strength advantage, you have to find ways to impose it in those matchups, because teams that have length and speed are gonna size down on this Cavs team. Guys like Claxton and Durant were not beating the Cavs up, but they were at least standing their ground. And I think it was really throwing the Cavs offense out of sync. I think there were a lot of plays where the Cavs, even with the lack of spacing, were getting to the rim and getting the shots they needed, or had man advantage from a physicality and position perspective, and failed to capitalize on it. So I want to throw a little bit of shade at our core front court, which I'm very, very rare shade from me, frankly. Mm-hmm. But like I think those guys in a matchup like this, I get why Toronto might overwhelm you with physicality every now and again, especially coming off of a Bucks win. I'm less cool with Brooklyn being able to get away with it.
Yeah, and I think that this is a consistent theme we're seeing this season, where teams that have a lot of length, and Brooklyn certainly fits that description, right? Like they're not, as you said, they're not the most physical team, but they have a lot of length, right? Like Claxton, Durant, Simmons, you got 3 7-footers out there. Royce O'Neal 6'5", but he's a rangy defender that's used to defending up. And then Kyrie, same size as Garland and Mitchell, so he doesn't fit that description. But I think whenever we go up against a team with a lot of length, what we're starting to see now is teams are making adjustments for the Cavs, and the help defense, like all the length that's defending the front court players, sag off those guys and try to take passing lanes away, right? Like they're trying to make sure that the Cavs, it's a little more difficult for the Cavs to get Allen, to get Mobley involved, and they'll sag off of Allen, they'll sag off of Mobley, they'll sag off of Okoro or Stevens, and try to impact those passing lanes. And the only real things that the Cavs can do it is, one, the guards have to be assertive and really create opportunities in those spots. And I think Darius did a very good job of that against Brooklyn. But the other component of that is the bigs need to be more aggressive. They really need to make the most of the matchup and make opposing defenses pay for helping off in that way. And I agree with you. I think that was a spot where if Allen and Mobley had better games, I think that would change how Brooklyn is able to defend them. I don't think Jared had a particularly great game on the offensive end. The missed dunk, the 2 free throws that he missed, it looked like a few times he was trying to put his body weight into Claxton and got off balance in those situations. In future matchups against Brooklyn, in future matchups against Toronto, Milwaukee, or anyone that kind of replicates this kind of defense with length, I think Mobley and Allen being very involved in the offense and being assertive with the touches they get, I think it's really important to breaking down that kind of defense.
Yeah, that I couldn't agree more. And obviously, it doesn't help that, Donnie probably has had his worst 2-game stretch of the season, fair to say.
Yeah.
Just not super impactful. He went 5 of 16, and I think all 5 of those shots were in the first 2 minutes of each half. I remember, because obviously I watched the game after. I didn't watch it live, and I was like, oh, Donnie had a terrible game. And then he starts the first quarter, and he's like, okay, he looks pretty good there. Then he starts the third quarter, okay, he looks pretty good there. And then just nada the rest of the way, and no free throws either. Only 2 free throws in that game for him as well. 5 assists helps a little bit, and I thought his defense in the fourth quarter was pretty good. But
that was a big difference from the Toronto and Brooklyn game. I thought Mitchell was making up for being taken out of the game a little bit offensively with Simmons face guarding him, which Ben Simmons did a phenomenal job. I think he had a real impact on
Plus
this game.
23 in his 34 minutes.
Yeah, he really had an impact out there, and it kind of looked like the Ben Simmons of old. But I thought Mitchell did a good job of getting involved in other ways and making a difference on the defensive end. I thought overall he did a pretty good job on Kyrie when he had that assignment. But I agree with you. You need to find ways, both Mitchell individually, as a coaching staff, and as a collective as a team, that when you are getting face guard and they're trying to take Mitchell out of it, okay, are we going to give him some on-ball reps? I know JB mentioned getting him on-ball reps, running some actions to free him up and get him the ball in those spots so that teams aren't able to take him out of the game for such a long period of time. But again, it's one of those things that collectively they all need to do better. And that's, I mean, you come away from this Brooklyn game, and I think there's a lot of plays individually that you'd like to have back. There's stretches, obviously, that didn't go well. And I do like those kind of matchups where even if we didn't get the result we wanted, you kind of get to see, okay, this is a team that even though together they don't have a lot of experience, there's a lot of individual playoff experience there. There's a lot of team players that have been part of winning teams and good organizations. And I think there's a lot that the Cavs can learn from that loss. And I thought it was a much, much better overall effort. It sucks that Brooklyn was hitting more contested threes, whereas in the Toronto game, I thought the Cavs just didn't play well on the defense at all. They gave up way too many open looks. And I understand that Toronto's a bad 3-point shooting team, but those numbers are going to regress to the mean. They're going to have that positive regression if you leave them open all the time. And certainly with them getting Gary Trent Jr. back, OG just came back in the lineup. They're a better team now that they're healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I thought their defensive effort in the second half was much better against Brooklyn. And, I thought if you think that the Cavs lost to elite shot making, I think it really presented itself in that fourth quarter where, I thought the Cavs were playing some pretty valiant defense, and Brooklyn still put up a 136 offensive rating. Just absolutely phenomenal stuff out of them. KD, when he was on the floor, when TJ Warren was on the floor, it was just under 160 in his 6 minutes. Just unbelievable shot making from them. But yeah, it's just kind of, that's kind of the risk you play when you play a great team, and your margin for error is just super low. And I think that the Cavs just kind of got lost in the sauce a few times, at the end of the first half, as a major example. And it's just really hard to come back from that. I wanted to ask schematically, our boy Ziggy on Twitter, shouts to Ziggy if you're listening, was griping a little bit about people who just say, put Mobley on the star player, and saying that, it's different when you have Mobley switch onto someone versus, you know, asking him to navigate screens and being a primary on-ball defender. And, you know, what are your thoughts on you know, Mobley as a primary defender in a matchup against, you know, a Kevin Durant sized, you know, apex big wing?
Yeah, I think whether it's Kevin Durant or Giannis or any of these guys that are very crafty, they can get you in foul trouble in a hurry. Like, I prefer having someone else take that assignment. Like, I think in a perfect world, whether it's Giannis, whether it's KD, it's Dean Wade, right? And we've seen Dean Wade do a good job on KD in the past, but having Mobley there to provide the help and for him to be the option that switches on to KD when the screen comes. When Mobley is the individual defender of Kevin Durant, if you go a full game that way, having him run around screens, run all across the court the way that Kevin Durant does, like, I just think that's going to sap from his effectiveness. And even if we're going to keep kind of taking the model of the Warriors, right, with how they work, because there are some parallels with the Cavs, Draymond wasn't on LeBron all the time, right? Like, they would have Iguodala, they'd have Harrison Barnes, they'd have someone else take the primary assignment, and Draymond would be there to provide the help. And I
think, to muck up the initial action, which matters as much as anything.
Absolutely. So I prefer having Mobley in that role, and I think that it was the right decision. I thought Lamar actually did a pretty good job on Kevin Durant, all things considered, defensively. But like you mentioned before, I think the best way to defend him is by messing up his rhythm, and the Cavs didn't do a great job of that on Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I thought it was just an interesting point, because it's going to become a louder call. Especially as the Cavs, you know, as their roster kind of takes shape, as they're figuring out whether they're going to prioritize size, shooting, you know, individual guard defense. You know, like if Okoro's out there, you know, he's so good on Kyrie that you're probably going to put him there. And it's just an interesting conundrum. And I always remember when LeBron was here and we would have those playoff series against the Hawks, they'd put Paul Millsap on him. And Hawks fans would kind of beat their chest and say, "Oh, Paul Millsap's so good at guarding LeBron," and you know he did a pretty good job. But I always would get kind of grumpy with Ty Lue and LeBron because he would just attack him in straight isolation. And I always say, bring a screener, even if it's a guard. Paul Millsap is not used to navigating screens as the point of attack defender. You know, he is not used to getting skinny and going under without giving up too much runway or whatever it might be. And I think we saw a little bit of that from Evan, especially in the late game, where he would get screened and it just was like a little awkward as he tried to figure out how to navigate. Because it's just like you have no muscle memory if you're a big at any point in your career of having to do screen navigation on ball, that is. So, like, I think
that's a really good point.
So, like, I think that even though those calls are going to get loud, that's why, you know, like I am such a fan of having a big defender in at the 3 to take those matchups, because again, you put someone who's a little more experienced navigating that kind of defense at the point of attack, and then you can muck up the actions. You can switch Evan out there, still have Jared on the back line, and the offense stalls out, and you got to start over, and you've burned 6-7 seconds off a 24-second shot clock already. So I just thought it was an interesting comment from Ziggy, and again, I just think it's going to happen more and more and more as we go on. I want to talk about Isaac. I think he played 2 really, really good games as a starter, then was on his way to a really, really good game in Toronto. Started out super strong, and then got in foul trouble, and then the game was over, and that was that. But he had 15 points on 6 shots against Toronto. In just 20 minutes. And then he plays 10 minutes last night. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest. I think Isaac's earned a little bit more. I think every time he was on the floor against Kyrie was not a major factor in a game where Kyrie was quite the major factor. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in it as well. I can kind of understand from the standpoint of, okay, we're 7-1 with this starting lineup with Lamar at small forward coming into this game. He missed some time due to injury, but now he's back. We're going to let this get some run. But I don't like that decision if it comes at the expense of giving Okoro those developmental minutes, especially when he has been playing a lot better recently and those lineups have been working well. I did like the late game adjustment to go with Jetty Osman with kind of the core four in the fourth quarter. I thought that's a lineup that's been very good for the Cavs in very limited minutes, and I wasn't surprised to see it be effective against Brooklyn. But obviously, when you have Allen and Mobley out there, whether it's Stevens or Okoro, that kind of defense helping off that I talked about earlier, you're going to experience it with either of those guys. But my big thing is, if you're going to make that concession and you're going to kind of go in on the defensive end and put your chips on that end of the table because you feel like you have more reliability there, I would like to see those minutes more evenly distributed between Lamar and Okoro. I think both of them have merited minutes lately, and I'd just like to see a little more consistency with that lineup. Where do you fall in this?
Well, I think it was tough. I think, folks who have been, really impressed with Okoro, I think we're pretty disappointed Lamar got the start. I kind of get it. You're not going to put Donnie on Kevin Durant. You're not going to put Darius. And Okoro's, not a big guy. They've had success with Dean on him. So you go, okay, maybe we start our biggest available wing that has, some toughness, some physicality in Lamar, and say, do your best on Durant. But to me, especially since I don't think Karras had a super impactful game at the guard spot, I just think you could have stolen some minutes for the guy, especially with Donnie having such a rough game. I think that, maybe you take a minute or two from Osman, a minute or two away from LeVert, and he's up to 15, 20 minutes. I didn't care about Okoro not starting as much as I cared about only 10 minutes when I thought he was being helpful when he was on the floor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Lamar in the starting lineup. I kind of understand.
I'm not either. I get it.
I understand that lineup has a good record. Now after the Brooklyn loss, we are 7-2 with that lineup starting games. But one of the kind of things that I've been tracking is they've only had a positive net rating in 3 of those 9 games.
That lineup, correct.
Right. When that lineup starts, only 3 of the 9 games, that lineup has had a positive net rating. And I don't want this to come across, because every time one of these rotation discussions comes up, I think people start to unfairly vilify a player or start pitting players against one another. Lamar has proven that he deserves minutes in this rotation. He's been very helpful. The 3 wins, I thought he was good in, particularly the Mavericks road win, which was one of their best road wins. He was very good on Luka, and he's been very good defensively in certain matchups. I just think when you have Lamar, Mobley, and Allen together, it just makes it a little too easy for the defense to cheat over. Someone's going to be left open, and it's usually Lamar or Evan in the corner, right? And we saw that a lot in the first half against Brooklyn, where the Cavs were getting good movement. The right pass was being made, but the pass was going to someone that Brooklyn wanted to leave open in Evan Mobley or Lamar Stevens. And I thought in the past, and we've talked about this, in the past, I thought Garland was too willing to kind of go with what the defense is giving him and just kind of make the right pass there. Whereas in this game, he made an adjustment in game and really started getting his own, right? Really creating opportunities and forcing the defense to kind of collapse around him. And I thought that was a good adjustment. But overall, the Lamar lineup just hasn't been effective enough for it to get the kind of run that it's been getting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I wanted to note, this also kind of goes back to my kind of gripe about us, about the bigs not imposing their physical will these last couple games. Listen, if you've got a shooting deficiency on the floor, you have to, dominate in other ways. And I think that's part of the reason why this lineup hasn't worked, is if you're going to play bully ball, you got to play bully ball. And if they're not imposing their will and the spacing isn't there. They're just losing the math problem. And I think one reason I think there has been some grump from the fan base this season, and a lot of it is just straight up expectations. You trade for Donovan Mitchell. You're coming off a surprisingly good year. I always say expectations are the thief of joy. But with that said, I think one of the other reasons is the team keeps going down 10 points to start games. They are doing a lot of digging out of holes because to this point, JB has not found a consistently successful starting lineup. And with 4, uber positive players and Darius, Donnie, Mobley, and Jarrett, that's a problem. So I do hope that, I have no, evidence supporting this one way or the other, but I'm pretty sure JB does not consider the starting lineup a done deal. Completely anecdotally.
And a fair amount of the beat has said and reported that the plan was for Wade to get that start. And I think we've seen it in the past. Like last year, to me, it made sense that Lowry's the starting small forward. And when he was out, even if Dean Wade wasn't in the rotation, he was kind of the plug and play guy, right? Like he went into that lineup to preserve the rotations. And it seems similar here where it was Karras. And then to try to get Karras going, he's with the second unit. So you go to Wade in theory, but Wade gets hurt. So you go to Lamar, right? And from there, like what I don't necessarily like about the lineup is I just feel like there is some missed opportunity just with the amount of minutes that it's been given when it hasn't necessarily been successful, right? Like since Dean Wade has gone out of the lineup, Okoro's minutes have actually gone down. Like the minutes per game have gone down by 3. And I just think that this is a good opportunity, especially when he's playing better, to continue giving him those reps. So I would just like to see kind of more being made of this developmental opportunity and this opportunity that's available due to injury by distributing the minutes a little more evenly, because you look at the lineup numbers and I think Lamar's been helpful in a lot of different lineups, but with the starting lineup, right now the starters have a plus 11.2 net rating without Lamar on the season per cleaning the glass, and a negative 3.4 with him on the court. The Karis LeVert lineup is a plus 9.1. The Okoro lineup is a plus 3.7. The Osman lineup the sample size is too small for us to really I'm not even going to say the number. It's very good.
Say
but the
say it,
sample size
Justin. Say it.
It's plus 54.
I wanted you to say it because I was going to say there is, if Dean Wade comes back and maybe the jumper, stays in flux because it was not good before he got hurt. I don't know if it was a knee or what it was, but he was going through an extended slump himself. Like, at what point does JB go to old Jetty Osman, the only wing he hasn't tried in that lineup, and the one who has had the most consistently good synergy with the starting group, and say, Jetty, buddy, I'm going to ride the roller coaster with you. You're starting.
Yeah, and I think against teams that have the length, like Toronto, like Brooklyn, you really do need to have that spacing to help keep them honest, right? So obviously it's disappointing. The core four with Dean Wade has played 11 possessions, and we're about to hit January. Like that's disappointing. And again,
that's mostly injuries, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been injuries. So again, I'm citing these numbers from Cleaning the Glass, which removes garbage time from that. If you have any confusion why it's slightly different than NBA.com. But even last night against Brooklyn, every single lineup the Cavs had that played more than 3 minutes was a net positive, except for the starting lineup. And some of that's to be expected, right? Like they're playing the hardest minutes. They're playing against the net starters. Sometimes in these matchups, what you want to do is just have your starting lineup kind of hold serve and stick with them and then make the most of the bench rotation. And this isn't an argument for, Lamar should be out of the rotation or going to any sort of extreme there. It's just more even distribution of the minutes and giving more guys a look with the core four, right? Like it's 44 days until the trade deadline. make the most of this opportunity and have a bunch of different lineup combinations to see what works, because the sample sizes are still small on some of these other guys, and I would just like to see a more even distribution. But again, we're looking at this from the outside and we don't know what's going on in practice. We don't know how to push guys' buttons the same way that JB Bickerstaff does, and we are seeing growth and improvement from the team, which is the most important thing. But just from an outside perspective, I'm just not the biggest fan of the Lamar starting lineup, because if we're going to go defense first, I'd at least like to see Okoro get more of those reps, because I think he does a better job pushing in transition. I think he helps the Cavs get out in pace, and the lineup, frankly, has just performed better to this point.
It's kind of, I'm at this point where I'm just kind of going to follow the numbers, like in terms of what I want. If we get, if Dean gets healthy and we see 10, 15 games with him in the starter with this group, then we'll have, Lamar sample size. We'll have a decent sample of Lamar. We'll have a decent sample of Okoro. We'll have a decent sample of Dean and Levert. And you know what? If all those still aren't working, then I would still keep trying other people because, it's the one, I think, legitimate wart on this team. Like, I think most of the concerns about fourth quarter closing from certain fans, I think super overblown. I think.
Frankly, I think the road concerns are a little overblown, but we'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, well, and I think you really talked me out of those concerns with data, saying that they have, I think like the third best road net rating in the league or something like that. Or they did at least a week or two ago. But I think like if you're looking at something that like when lineups pare down and you get to the postseason, your starters got to be good. Like every minute is too precious to have to rely on your ninth man to bail you out or your eighth man to bail you out with a good lineup. So I think it is my number one concern for the rest of the season is making sure that starting lineup goes from actively not super helpful. I mean, again, most of the one with Lamar lost, the one with Karras lost. And had a bad net rating. I think the one with Okoro has a negative net rating right now, correct? Or is it positive?
No, it's positive on Cleaning the Glass. It's negative on NBA.com.
Got it. So, who knows? Obviously, the definition of garbage time is nebulous, and Isaac's season has been nebulous, but I just want to see a lineup work because it's kind of jarring going from last season when the Cavs starters ran everyone off the floor to this season where, it's all these other lineup combinations that are having to claw the Cavs back into games. One thing before we move off Brooklyn that I wanted to note, they're running some freaking good offense now. It is so I don't know if it's a wake-up call. I don't know if it's Jacques Vaughn as the head coach. I don't know, what happened. But when I watched that Boston series last year, I watched them run the most basic stuff that was getting blown up with relative ease. So much
their passing was so good.
Yeah, so much dependence. So they had so much dependence on KD just to create out of a high pick and roll or off like a simple pin down. And in this game, I thought they did such a good job getting their stars to their spots or getting them the ball with advantage. And it's no surprise that team is running teams off the court right now, including, every other good team in the league too.
Yeah, they just blew out Milwaukee 2 days prior to playing us, right? Like they are an absolute buzzsaw right now. And when you combine the better offense they're getting, the playmaking, the shot making, like Kyrie and KD are going to be able to do that to you. Like you can make them work and they can still do that for an entire series. It's trying to contain everybody else. And when you have Ben Simmons making an impact there as a connector, when you have even like TJ Warren makes the right pass, Yuta Watanabe makes great decisions out there and is a good shooter. And they're missing Joe Harrison and Seth Curry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Two super high IQ players. I have a quick TJ Warren aside because I know that Warren was a player that a lot of Cavs fans wanted the team to, take a flyer on in free agency. And, while I think some people might have watched him cook the Cavs and say, "Oh, we should have gotten him," to me, it was kind of an example of like, hey, this is an example of an upside of taking on a distressed asset. I don't think the Cavs would have been wise to sign TJ Warren with the information that was out there available, especially given that they had already signed Ricky Rubio. You can't add two, like seriously injured players as your two free agency acquisitions. But with that said, like, it just shows me that, like, over the next couple of years, as this team looks for, more help on the wing, like, it can be found. Warren's on a minimum contract right now, and I don't know if that game is nearly as dominant for Brooklyn if he's not out there. I thought he was awesome, and you can find players like that if you're smart and if you take the right risks. And sometimes there's guesswork, like there's also a world where TJ Warren doesn't play a single game for Brooklyn this year. He hadn't played in 2 years, but he's showing enough in the minutes he's playing that I think their gamble is paying off.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get really impactful service for a budget price, you are laughing, which is why we love the support we get from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I'm not ready to move off of Brooklyn because we have not spent enough time on how awesome Darius Garland was in this game. Fun stat. Garland now has 4 games of over 40 points, and 3 of them have come this season. He is out of his mind. It is so great to see him have kind of one of these massive games. And, it reminded me of how good he was in Brooklyn in that first play-in game, his first kind of real taste of that kind of action where Brooklyn got out to run. They got out to a big lead. And in that game, he got the Cavs back into it. He gave them a puncher's chance because he was just so dominant as a scorer. And for him to do it again against Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant on this stage, it was just so much fun to see Garland cook, and just a reminder that when he gets hot, there's few players in the league that get as hot as he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it goes to show you what a stupid idiot I was. I never thought even at his best he was going to be this kind of volume scorer. And, this was such an efficient night. I mean, 46 on 20 field goal attempts, got to the line at a super high level, and I think mostly earned it. Wasn't wasn't a ton of grift ball. I thought his relocation was really, really good. I think Brooklyn was, maybe closed out too hard on him on some possessions, and he was able to get a lot of easy rim attacks, but also just a ton of craft. I've talked about how I thought his finishing last year was a little bit stronger than his finishing this year. Not in this game. He was putting English on the ball on the way up. He was using the glass super well. He was really, really attacking with gusto. And man, he kept him in the game. If he scores 35 points, this is a 20-point blowout, and it's not even close. And maybe our discourse is a lot darker. Another little note: 8 assists to only 1 turnover. You can make the case that this is his best game of the year.
Yeah, it's certainly up there. I thought that he played really under control. And, like I said before, I think there's certain matchups where defenses are going to be giving Garland and Mitchell a certain look, and they're going to have to say, no, I'm going to force you to change what you're doing defensively. I'm going to create an opportunity out of nothing. And that's what the best scorers in the NBA do, right? And I think Mitchell has done that on several occasions this year. And on nights where things aren't going for other guys, where you need Darius Garland to be this kind of assertive to open up opportunities. And I thought, as we mentioned before, Biggs could have done a little bit better of a job capitalizing on the opportunities that were being created. But overall, I thought that this was a really, really assertive game. And this is what the Cavs are going to need from Garland and Mitchell come playoffs, right? Like this, especially against the best teams in the league, and probably against Brooklyn more than any other team in the East. Like, I don't think any team in the East has as high of a top gear offensively as Brooklyn does. Like, a great stat that I saw last night was that Boston's D rating by series against the Warriors, it was just shy of 111. Bucks, 101.7. Heat 106.6. The Nets 117.1. Like that was a sweep, but that was the only offense, even though it looked disjointed, that was the only offense that actually scored a ton on Boston, who was elite defensively last year. You can contest them, you can do anything you want, you can make them work, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to score with Brooklyn. And Garland having that kind of a game is exactly what the Cavs need in these matchups, because honestly, when you get to the playoffs, if Garland and Mitchell aren't averaging over 50 points per game, I don't think the Cavs are making a sustained run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I thought he was awesome in this game. I think people who are... I think there's this, there is becoming this little established narrative that Darius isn't as good as he was last year. And I just at a fundamental level do not agree. I think honestly, I think that's just a prisoner of the moment take, where he had 2 bad weeks at a time where the Cavs were struggling as a team. So when you start to diagnose, okay, well, why are the Cavs struggling? Garland not playing well is at the top of the list, right? But the reality is he had bad weeks last year, it's just, you didn't expect to win every single game, that's the thing. And it's as I said, expectations are a thief of joy. And because if the Cavs had this exact same game against Brooklyn last year, I would have tipped my cap to Brooklyn and said, well, they're better. But that's not the situation we find ourselves in this year. We expect to win a home game against every team in the league. There is not a single team in the league that the Cavs will likely be not favored or close to favored when at full health, when playing at Romo Fijo. So I think it's an adjustment of expectation, but I see a guy who can get to a volume score, can be a volume scorer at a way higher level than he used to be. I see a guy who is a much more active off-ball player, a much more artful creator as a passer. Who has fewer turnovers this year, right? Like the assist turnover ratio has improved. Do you not remember how many 9 turnover games he had last year? It was a legit talking point on this podcast. It was hey, how much do we need to worry about how many freaking turnovers this guy has on a night-to-night basis? There were a 2-week stretch where it was at least 6 every single game, it felt like. So I think we've seen significant growth, and some of the things that there are some anecdotal things around the margins. Had a couple bad games, had a slight shooting slump, but overall, I just think every part of his game's better, with the exception of his finishing, which I think is about where it was last year at this point in the season, but maybe a little worse. And that's a little noisy. He's a small guard. You're gonna vacillate a little bit about how well your layups are working, and sometimes that's also a byproduct of the team you have around you too.
Yeah, certainly. Spacing factors in, the fact that he's playing at a slower pace than he did even last year, right? But I think when you look at it, that he's averaging more points per game than he did prior to the All-Star break last year on basically the same efficiency while playing alongside Donovan Mitchell, right? That is one of the toughest things to figure out when you're team building, is how scalable are your players. And the fact that there hasn't been a dent in Darius's production at this point in the year, despite playing alongside a MVP candidate in Donovan Mitchell, that's really exciting. The fact that you have Garland and Mitchell scoring at that rate, and Evan Mobley is still giving you the same number of points per game, that actually is an improvement. I know it doesn't jump off the box score, but when you have 2 high usage guys and you're still getting yours as the 4th option rather than the 3rd, that's an indicator of growth. That's a positive thing to look at. So I completely agree. I think Garland has improved, and I think he's going to get better as the year goes on. As long as this team stays healthy, I think as a unit and individually, I expect them to get better, because that's been the case under JB Bickerstaff. That's been the case with this team. He talked about it at the practice availability today, but it took them a few cracks to beat Milwaukee, but they learned from each of the experience. He described the players as sponges, right? They're looking at the tape of what didn't go well, and the point of these measuring stick games isn't that, we have to look infallible in all of these measuring stick games. It's that you actually learn when you come up short, okay, what can we do to close that gap?
Use them as a measuring stick.
Right, right. And
If you as a fan are disappointed by that measurement, that's kind of immaterial.
yeah, I mean, I certainly get disappointed. I don't
Sure.
want to lose to Toronto.
No.
I don't want to lose to Brooklyn. Like,
Of course not.
no, it sucks. But now the Cavs have to learn from their experiences earlier in the season, where a couple of these losses have kind of snowballed in the past, right? Where you see an 8-game winning streak and a 5-game losing streak, a 4-game winning streak and a couple losses in a row, right? Now the Cavs are in a position where you have 2 losses, one that's understandable, one I think is a little more on them. And now you have to battle some of those road woes, because even though the net rating is good, the overall record isn't great on the road. And we already talked about the importance of these divisional games when it comes to tiebreakers. And now you play Indiana, then you play Chicago in Chicago, and then you host Chicago. Like, this is a very, very important stretch and an opportunity for us to see, have the Cavs learn from some of their struggles on the road, and if they're able to kind of right the ship quicker, because that's one of the things that contenders do that the Cavs are going to need to learn how to master.
Yeah, and by the way, I really hope we see Okoro back in the starting lineup on Thursday. You know, that Indiana team has a lot of elite guard play on the perimeter. Their wings are, you know, just so by comparison. Yeah. You know, so I really hope that, you know, I hope that we get to see that and see, you know, Okoro get another bite at that particular apple moving forward.
Because I think even just from a matchup standpoint, the point of attack defense against Halliburton and the guards that Indiana has, like, that's something he can bring to the table that I don't think necessarily anyone else can. And yeah, like, even if it is Lamar, I would just like to see a more even minutes distribution. Like, that's my biggest thing. Like, I'd like to see Jetty get opportunities with that unit, because I think it's going to continue to be effective. When Dean Wade is back, I can't wait to see what that looks like. The update at practice was that he's coming along a little slower than Ricky, but JB did mention that they are excited that Ricky is pretty much ready to go, and they expect him back early January. I cannot be more excited for that. And I was like, oh god,
I wanted to talk about Ricky, man, because I
was like, oh, early January. I've waited so long, and then I realized that is literally next week. That could be 3 games from now for all we know. So this is getting real. It's getting around the corner, and I can't wait to see what it means for the team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to have Ricky back, you know, and even if he kind of takes a minute to work his way up to speed, you know, like, he is just basketball joy incarnate. You know,
yeah.
It
could take him a few weeks to get up to speed. Let's be real.
But you know, like, ultimately, you know that I am biased towards basketball genius, and Ricky's a basketball genius. You know, I think an underrated thing is that he actually probably helps the team's 3-point shooting a little bit. You know, I know he's never been known as a 3-point shooter, but I think his willingness to take them was really, really helpful for this team last year. I think he's
going to help the pace.
Yeah, he'll help the pace, which I think has been a little too slow at times. And ultimately, I just think he is just such a great orchestrator for a team that's still very young. To have a savant on the floor with you just really, really helps. He is the, you know, I abuse the expression, but he is the tide that raises all boats. When Ricky and Dean are back, I don't think JB can get past a 9-man rotation still. Who plays?
Yeah, I mean, it might be somewhat matchup dependent. I'd certainly like to see an established 9-man rotation
on any given night. Who plays? You know, like, throwing away like any special, you know, matchup juice.
Yeah, I mean, in general, like, I would assume that Dean starts. That you have Ricky, Karras, Okoro, Love coming in off the bench, and I think it's possible that we could see Lamar go back to the spot he was in before, right, which he was outside the rotation, and you bring him back in different matchups. Maybe the 9th man on a game-to-game basis. Some nights it's Lamar, some nights it's Okoro. Like,
well, you know who you forgot to mention there was Jetty.
Oh my God! Yeah, so we might have to go 9-10.
I don't think you can do 10. Like, here's the thing: if they're gonna go 10. They have to win earlier in games than they're winning right now. Because, you know, if you've got 4 dudes getting 38 minutes, you can't play a 10-man rotation. There's just not enough minutes. You know, there's not enough spillover minutes to go around. So, you know, I think, like,
I'd assume Ricky's going to be on a minute restriction when he gets into the lineup as well for a while.
Absolutely. But, like between Okoro, Levert, Osman, and Lamar and Wade, that's a big group of guys. And I think maybe 2 of them could be on the outside looking in of the rotation on a night-to-night basis. So, like, it's going to be really, really important that these guys kind of earn their keep and play really, really good ball as the team gets healthy, because, JB's going to have a wealth of options. He has not had a wealth of options the last month or so on the wing.
It's funny.
They've had 9-10 active players most weeks.
It's funny. We'll sit here on the outside looking at rotations and kind of like theorize what we think could work, what we'd like to see, and what we win. I'm so happy I don't have to make these decisions, because I don't think it's necessarily an easy one, right? Like,
it's certainly not.
There's no like perfect two-way options,
and whatever you pick, if it doesn't go well, everyone's going to call you an idiot for picking that choice.
Oh yeah, no. The
so
other
hard.
option was so obvious and was 100% going to work for sure. There are no easy answers there, and a lot of it's probably going to come down to like, how do guys look in practice? And again, this is part of why I want to experiment more with the lineups and see other combinations with the core four, because you want to have those reps to say, okay, well, I know this worked well against this team, and this didn't necessarily work well against another. And maybe these rotations are going to be based on matchups to some extent, but overall, the one part we know isn't going to be matchup dependent is that core four, right? So figuring out how different combinations work with them and how you can deploy those options against other teams, I think is something I'd like to see a little bit more of. And obviously, obviously injuries have hurt the ability to experiment in the season, and sometimes you just want to get right. And I think the effort that Lamar has brought has helped the Cavs get a little bit out of this funk. But overall, as I said, just because that lineup hasn't necessarily been effective even in the wins, it's something that I'd like to see just a little less of.
Yeah, and even though earlier in the podcast I talked about, TJ Warren and being able to find helpful wings, and in the marketplace, even on a budget, it's not easy to find the perfect alchemical fit at the three when you have 4 established stars that you have to cater, you have to find the perfect archetype to fit around them. Memphis never found a small forward to go with their grit and grind. Conley, Allen, Zebo, Gasol never found a consistent
Rudy Gay
three.
Erasure.
I am erasing both Rudy Gay and Tayshaun Prince in this conversation. So it's gonna be interesting. Because right now Dean Wade probably looks like the most perfect fit, but I think everyone's assuming better high volume 3-point shooting than he has demonstrated thus far in his career, with the exception of
coming
the
off
first couple
injury.
weeks of the year. So yeah, exactly. So it's going to be, everyone has a lot to prove in this wing rotation. I think they all know it. I would imagine the coaching staff knows it, and it's going to be, survival of the fittest here in the rotation as bodies get healthy and minutes start dwindling, especially mid-season practice time is not exactly abundant. So it's going to be a matter of whoever earns it is going to have to show it, is going to have the upper hand, and it's going to be their job to lose, and we'll see who takes it. It's going to be really interesting.
Absolutely, and this is an important stretch. The Cavs are now slipped down to 4th,
which I hate, by the way. I hate. It looks so much worse than being in 3rd.
It really does. And it's funny too, because you look at the top of the conference, Boston and Milwaukee both 5-5 in their last 10 games. Cavs are 6-4, but then you got Brooklyn on a 9-game winning streak. You got Philadelphia on an 8-game winning streak, 8-2, and Philly's only a half game back of them.
Half game away from not having home court in the first round. I'm getting angsty Carter is starting to creep in. You got to wash him out, Justin, with some reckless optimism.
Well, I'd prefer to wash it out with some road wins, because if they can take care of it,
go sign.
If they could, if they could take advantage of these opportunities, if they could beat Indiana, if you can sweep Chicago, like that gives you some real breathing room. And even if Philly keeps winning, you got to be able to stack these wins, especially going into an incredibly tough January. In reality, Cavs very well might slide down the standings in January and then make up for it with a tough or a much easier February, March, and close to the season. Like that's when the schedule gets really light for the Cavs. But we've also seen like you can't count on that. You might have end of season injuries and not be able to capitalize on those games. So you got to make with what you have available. And like even right now, Indiana's up 8 on Atlanta with 9 minutes to go. Like this is a tough team, right? Like you're going to have to earn this game. Chicago's probably going to be fighting for the season. Same way Toronto. Toronto was fighting for their season, and there's a real chance if Toronto went on a major slide that they may consider blowing it up, right? So
Toronto's getting boat raced at home right now against the Clippers. So,
well, thank you for cheering me up. I mean,
happy to help.
Let's end the pod on a happy note. Toronto getting boat raced. Hopefully, Washington can hang on against Philly and give us a little bit more breathing room too. That would be pretty sweet. But yeah, you're going to play some desperate teams. You're going to be playing teams that are looking to prove that hey, we should be buyers, not sellers at the trade deadline. The field is wide. A lot of teams are in this mix. So, Cavs, we'll see how they respond, and let's get things started on Thursday in Indy. Carter, last time we did planning on the podcast, it didn't go so well. You thought you were free yesterday and you weren't. Are you going to be free after Indy on Thursday?
Here's hoping. Though I'm babysitting. I'm still on vacation from work. I've got my daughter solo and my niece is coming over. It's the first time I've got both girls together solo. So I might be an absolute freaking zombie by the time we get there, because those two together are fire starters. But I think I'm up to the task, Justin. I'm ready. This is like pre-second kid boot camp for me. Only 2 months out from that. So like I gotta get in game shape here.
Well, just like the Cavs have 4 stars that, pick up the slack when one another maybe isn't feeling it. That's why we have 2 of us. So if I need to carry you, I will.
Slack, brother.
Oh, I'm always carrying you. Let's be honest there.
Absolutely.
But really, we are carried by the support of our fans and the love you guys give. We really do appreciate it. If you're watching live on YouTube and you want to support us, like, subscribe, click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via a podcast, you can leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, you can send us a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.